Thanks for joining us again on our Bring Back Trophies of War series. We have two SKSs. I'm sure that everybody's seen, handled, shot an SKS. I mean, they're a pretty common rifle. They were available very cheaply. But these two were actually brought back from the Vietnam War. These were used by the Viet Cong. There are papers, documentation from where they were brought back, and Jeff is going to give us a little history on both of these rifles.
Actually, a friend of mine's father brought both of these back from Vietnam. He was there from 1971, October 1971 to September 1972. And I've got the bring back papers for both of these firearms. And that's one thing they've changed quite a bit from the Vietnam War. From where they had with the Second World War, which was just one single form. But by the time Vietnam come around, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 forms for each one of these guns that were brought back, as far as with these two. And that was by this period in 1972, because this bring back paper and the other one were both dated 20 April 1972. But both of these rifles have got a lot of wear. And you'd think that these were early guns just by looking at them with the wear that they have on them. But this gun was actually manufactured in 1968, and this one was manufactured in 1966. These were both brought home in 1972, and Terry, I don't know if you think the same thing, but these two rifles look like they've been through more stuff than the World War II guns that we reviewed.
Look like they've been dragged through muck.
Oh yeah, I mean this one, literally in 1972 was 6 years old, and this was 4. But holy cow, these things look like they have been drugged behind a freaking deuce and a half. There's pock marks in this upper handguard of this particular gun. There's dents and dings and parts, and a huge divot taken out here. These things were definitely...
They saw some use.
Yeah, they saw some use. The stock on, let's see, this one here. Yeah, the stock on this one is splintered out pretty badly right here on the left side under the receiver. They've seen some use. And of course, with the Viet Cong and the North Vietnamese both using a variety of Chinese and Russian firearms, these were both Chinese manufactured firearms. They have a triangle with a 26 on the inside of them. And as far as with their serial number ranges in the 11 million and the 13 million range. This was manufactured in 1966, and this was manufactured in 1968.
We're going to give you guys a walk around of these two rifles and show you just some of the stuff on the stocks, some of the wear and tear that these guns have seen.
It's kind of, wild to everybody thinks Vietnam, AK-47, so on and so forth, but that wasn't so. Terry and I were talking earlier about where a lot of the firearms in Vietnam came from as far as what was captured. I mean, there's a variety of guns that were captured by the Americans that, there were French firearms because there was French occupation of French Indochina, which was Vietnam, up until the mid 50s or so. They really ran the French out of Vietnam. So you see a combination of French firearms, World War II, German and so on, different types of firearms, American firearms as far as that were captured from the South Vietnamese, which the Americans gave the South Vietnamese a variety of firearms from the Second World War. A lot of M1 carbines, M1 Garands. There were grease guns, Thompsons, you name it. Those were things that we had given the South Koreans to kind of shore their military up. And, of course, the North Koreans and the Viet Cong captured those. But, you see these SKSs, there were Russian SKSs, Chinese SKSs, Russian AKs, Chinese AKs, 9130s, M44s, all kinds of things that were captured in Vietnam. Just a variety of firearms. MAT 49 9mm submachine guns, 49-56 rifles, just like I say, a variety of firearms. But getting back to these particular guns right here, this gentleman was able to bring 2 firearms back from the Vietnam War with these papers, and when you think about that, they entrusted them in the late 60s, early 70s with bringing stuff like this back, and our guys still can't do that to this day.
And another thing about these rifles, they are semi-automatic.
That's right.
Firearms. It's not like these wouldn't be legal here to begin with for a private person to own without the paperwork and tax stamp and whatnot. It's not like they're full auto or anything. They're semi-automatic rifles.
Yeah, I mean, just like I want to read a little bit off of these. I'm not going to exclude names and serial numbers and things like that, and because now that's just kind of keep some privacy there. But said theater and inclusive period of service: Vietnam, Southeast Asia, 2nd October 1971 to 29 September 1972, and down it says. Describe item: Chi-Com carbine, 7.62 millimeter, Type 56 with bayonet. Has a serial number, and it says serial number of identified mark if firearm include country manufacturer. It says the serial number in Communist China. Then this was, of course, in April of 1972 and was signed off on by an authorizing officer. And like I said, there's 6 different forms, here in the other one. Both of these have got the same type of documentation with them.
None of this includes any information as to how these firearms were actually obtained by the soldier, do they?
No, it doesn't. There's no action report. There's nothing like that through any of this. I mean, heck, someone could have just, picked them up and done whatever. I mean, there could have been, some serious action, for these to been picked up and so on. But, just looking through everything that I have here, there's nothing that says any kind of a story or anything to go along, with the firearms. Just there's a application for an export license and so on and so forth, because these were after 1968. Before 1968, you didn't have to worry about export licensing or anything like that. To bring back something, they had to go through those things because of the 1968 Gun Control Act. So things had even changed while those guys were over in Vietnam. As far as the way they could bring these back, and that's why with some of these World War II guns, there were only one single form, or Korean War or whatever, one single form to bring these back.
Yeah, fill out the form of mail.
Now there's triplicate, duplicate, and quadruplet, and whatever. It seemed like they had to jump through quite a few hoops, but at least he got to bring these back. You can kind of see both of these have got the spike, bayonet. This one's extended on here. Both of them got the cleaning rods. They're both complete, rifles. They neither one have got a sling on them, but The numbers are matching on the guns.
And they don't have the cleaning kits.
Don't have the cleaning kits in the buttstock, but numbers matching on the dust cover of the receiver and on the receiver itself, on the bolt, on the bottom metal. These have got screwed in barrels, but the trigger mechanisms are stamped and welded. So the stocks have matching numbers on them. So even with them beaten all to pieces, a lot of the all of the numbers match on these guns. The sights are complete and are usable on both of them. They're still have the leaf spring in here, and everything works there. I mean, the guns are usable, can be fired right now. Are relatively clean on the inside. The bores aren't as bad as I would expect them to be, given the appearance of the exterior of the firearms. I mean, good gosh, looking at them, you'd think they would be a solid rust tube on the inside of the barrel, but they were kind of taken care of, I guess.
Well, whenever I was younger, I was buying the Chinese SKSs, and they had nice looking stocks and everything, and
oh yeah,
and they looked like new guns.
Oh yeah, and there a lot of those they never had service.
Right.
When you think about when you're manufacturing different firearms, say the SKS or the AK, and you've got upwards of how many million people in your military. The Chinese almost have 2 billion people in their country. So, supplying firearms for that many, when they started selling firearms, exporting firearms, a lot of the firearms had never been used at all, period. They were military arms, but they were in perfect shape. The only guns, as far as SKSs I ever saw in the country that have seen extreme use are the Romanian and the Yugoslavian. Some of the Russians, you'll see a little bit of use, as far as that goes, but for the most part, though the Romanian SKSs that I've seen were beat to pieces. There's some of them looked as bad as these, and some of the Yugos, I've seen a lot of wear and tear, and a lot of where they have their grenade launching, the switch, drum right up here. A lot of corrosion in that area on the Yugoslavians. That really, some of those were not even fireable because of that, or even fired single shot. But they sure as heck weren't a semi-automatic. But with these, even the shape they're in, we could go out and empty them right now and be fine. I wouldn't be afraid to do it one bit. But it's kind of wild how we see, like we were talking about the SKSs and things being affordable guns, and now they're starting to go up just like M1 Garands.
Well, I was looking at one the other day. I saw an SKS that was priced at what you used to be able to buy an AKM for.
Oh yeah, I mean, I've got one in a rack right now at the store for $430 at Yugo. And it's not unusual to see SKSs in the $350 to $400 range now. And Russians, oh my gosh, Russians have started going out of sight. I've seen some Russians go into the $650 range. Values on these are really starting to come up quite a bit. When we did our video on the Japanese Arasaka Type 38, it's kind of sad that a gun that is 20 some years the senior of either one of these firearms right here, that hasn't garnered that much value compared to what these have. I guess that's just a difference between what people will pay for a semi-automatic and what people will pay for a bolt action.
Right.
There's kind of been a upsurge in people looking for good quality SKSs.
And these are semi-automatic with a 10-round capacity and
Yeah.
a fixed magazine fed through stripper clips.
That's right.
But you can get extended capacity magazines for
You
them.
can really. I mean, it's never was designed for that, and I've seen several people put those in, and those magazines suck. And to me, they need to be kind of kept in their pure fashion the way they are right here, because really, if you want a gun that's got an attachable magazine in 7.62 by 3.9, why not buy an AK? for the price difference of what they are now.
Right.
Why would you put more money destroying a firearm that should be kept in this form when you could buy an AK?
And if you look around for it, they're not quite as common, but you can find some of the SKSs that have a 20-round fixed magazine.
Yeah, the Chinese did two different versions. They did the Type D, and they did the SKS Sporter. The Type D had a Monte Carlo type stock on it, and the Sporter had a thumbhole stock. But both of those took AK-47 magazines. One thing though with those that these will lock back on the last round, but on the Sporter and the Model D, because of the way that the AK mag would come up here, there was no way for that bolt to lock back. But they're neat guns, and they were made off paratrooper SKS actions and so on, where the paratrooper's a shorter gun than this, and they have really started to come up in value because they're past 93, 94, none of those were imported anymore. And you'll see more of the SKS Sporters because of the thumbhole stock than what you do usually the Ds. That just, like I said, different variants of where these came from, which originally was, of course, a Russian design, the Simonov carbine. And it's just, as you see the different forms of these, that I know of, there's Russian, Chinese, Romanian, Yugoslavian, and Albanian. Those are the most of the ones that I can think of right off the top of my head. There might be other countries that manufacture, but I believe that's the only ones. The Albanians are the rarest ones that I know of.
I don't think that I've ever seen an Albanian.
It's got a different look, just like the Yugoslavian's got a little different look. The upper hand guard and the gas tube and the stock is a little different configuration. You can kind of tell from the receiver and from here back and from here forward that it's an SKS, but it's got a different look to it, just like with the Yugoslavian, where they've got the grenade launching mechanism on it and sights. And it's a little more robust firearm than what the other SKSs are. But you can tell a difference. I mean, you can see it's hard to tell a Chinese, a Romanian, and a Russian apart, 10 feet away. But you can definitely tell an Albanian and the Yugoslavian apart, several feet away because of the way they look.
Now, would they have had any of the Yugos or the Albanians in Vietnam?
Not that I've ever heard of. I mean, those were Combloc nations, Warsaw Pact nations that made their firearms for their country, and I don't believe. I mean, anything could happen, anything's possible, but I wouldn't believe they would have much support as far as arms going to Southeast Asia. I mean, I could be wrong, but I've never heard of that myself. So, I mean, mainly, like I say, with this type of firearm, you're going to see Russian, you're going to see Chinese coming from Vietnam. But, these are neat guns. There's most people out there that are acquainted with SKSs. I'm sure some of the younger viewers and things out there that are getting into firearms aren't seeing them in stores like I saw them when I was growing up and getting into guns, or when Terry did. Neat story is when I first started selling firearms years ago, almost 27 years ago, right prior to that time, a Chinese SKS and either a case of 1,220 or 1,440 rounds of ammunition, so the gun and a case of ammunition, could be purchased for $99.99. So you think about a 10-round semi-automatic rifle and all that ammunition for $100. And soon after that, you saw the rifles and the ammunition being sold separately, and the rifles soon came up to the ranks of $100 themselves, $130, $180, and now we have what we have now.
I think the first SKS that I bought was around 150 to 200, somewhere in there. Didn't come with any ammunition. It came with the folding spike bayonet. I mean, it was basically the same thing that you see here. But, it was around 150 to 200.
Oh, yeah. I remember The first SKS that I purchased, and I think I had a whole sum total of about maybe $90 or $100 in it, and I couldn't get rid of it quick enough because I got an SKS Sporter. Thumb hole stock AK mags, this, that, and the other, because AKs were a little higher, a little harder to get, and the MAK 90 was what you'd see the most of them, and truthfully, I couldn't stand the look of that freaking thumb hole stock, and it just didn't seem like an AK to me. But that SKS Sporter, for some reason, it really appealed to me, and I got rid of it like an idiot. It belongs to a friend of mine to this day that won't sell it back. You know, he knows who he is, and I'm gonna beat him up someday and take my gun back. But you know, just as you go through the years and you start a different collection and different things, I don't get rid of much nowadays. And I look back at that and, you know, strapped for cash, and the only way I could get another gun was to trade one off. And so now I look back at that and think, darn, if I had.
Well, these bringbacks are definitely a couple pieces that you know, if these were mine, they would stay in my collection. They wouldn't be going anywhere.
Yes, these would be passed down from generation to generation if they were mine. And it's, you know, it's kind of a memorial. That's.
Well, Vietnam was such a controversial war to begin with.
Oh, of course. You know, we can talk about politics all day long, and the fact that I think that there were, you know, upwards of, you know 58,000 individuals that gave their life for a conflict we probably shouldn't have been in the first place. But you know what you do when your government calls, you go. You believe in what they're saying, and you do what you do, and that's part of being a patriot. And I think, though, that we need to look into what our government wants us to do from now on, because it's one of those things where, yeah, these guns got to come back here, but at the cost of what? And that really sucks.
Yeah.
And no matter what. I don't think anybody can say that. I'm not a peace Nick or whatever, or a hippie or any of that stuff, but when you see that our guys and gals gave their lives in blood, sweat, and tears, and everything from practically the early 60s to about 1975, for what? Anyway, that sucks. Hope we learned something from that, and you know, the new, you know, next generations don't have to suffer the same things. So guys, thanks for coming along. I hope you enjoyed looking at these two SKSs.
To me, it's more like a visit with these two
Oh,
rifles.
yeah, absolutely. So, I can still stand here. I'll look at these guns more, and I'll look at this camera for the simple fact that I'm still sit here and
I've caught myself doing the same thing.
Yeah,
just sitting here, you know, just admiring the rifles instead of looking at the camera or talking about anything. So,
you know, thinking about what I just said, you know, where these guns have been and why they were there, and what the people that were carrying them were thinking, and what happened to them. I mean, like I say, even though they aren't alive, it's a living memorial to you know, times gone by. So we've got a little bit more in our Bring Back series. Hope you stick with us and look for our next video, and like and subscribe on YouTube, and check us out on Facebook. And tell us what you think.
see you soon.